My father didn't shout. That was the scariest part. He stood at the head of the dining table, jaw tight, eyes cold, and pointed at the front door like he was directing traffic. Get out. His voice was low and flat. Like he had already decided everything before I walked in. My mother's hands were trembling, but not because she was unsure. She was holding my younger sister, Olivia, the way you hold something you're terrified of losing. Around the table, my aunt, my uncle, and two cousins wore the same uncomfortable expression, the look of people relieved the storm is aimed somewhere else. I didn't do anything, I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Olivia made a sound. Not a full sob. A careful, bruised little exhale, the kind someone makes when performing pain for an audience. Then my mother slid her phone across the table like evidence. On the screen was a text thread. From my number. I took it. I'm sorry. I'll pay it back. Please don't tell Dad. My stomach dropped. That wasn't me. But my parents had already decided. And watching my father's hand still aimed at the door, I understood what was really happening. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a verdict. It had started as an ordinary Sunday dinner. Candles on the table. Chicken casserole. My father had laughed at something on the news. Normal. Safe. Then Olivia remembered the envelope. $10,000 in cash, kept in my father's office safe for real emergencies. Olivia's voice cracked as she explained it. The money was for her upcoming specialist visit, a new scan, more tests for the chronic condition she had managed since she was 16. Her health had always been the invisible weather system in our house. Everyone moved around it carefully, always checking the sky. Now the money was gone. My father opened the safe himself and stood staring at the empty space. Then he turned slowly and asked Olivia if she knew anything. She shook her head with wet eyes. Then she looked at me, a quiet, deliberate look. Megan was upstairs earlier, she said softly. I hadn't been upstairs. I had been in the kitchen helping my mother rinse dishes. But my father didn't verify the timeline. He didn't ask my mother to confirm. He didn't check anything. He just turned to me and said, "How could you?" Those 3 words landed like a closed door. I tried to stay calm. I said clearly, "Check the camera above the safe. Call the bank. Let's go together right now." My mother flinched as if my steady voice was disrespect. My father said, "Don't try to manage us." Olivia pulled her sleeves down over her wrists. A small, almost invisible movement. My mother's eyes snapped to it, trained to see Olivia as fragile, always. I watched something shift in her face immediately. That fierce protectiveness lighting up like a flare. My aunt murmured that the text seemed pretty clear. My uncle studied the tablecloth. That message is not from me, I said. Someone faked it. I would never stop. My father's voice was flat. For once in your life, stop lying. For once in my life. As if I had a long history of dishonesty that I had somehow missed. As if lying was simply who I was and everyone at this table already knew it. I looked around at the faces of people I had known my entire life. Family, people who had held me at birthday parties and holidays, and I felt something cold and clarifying settle in my chest. They had already chosen. Before I walked in. Before I said a single word. The texts were just the paperwork. My father went upstairs and came back with a plain manila folder. He set it on the table like a contract already signed. Inside, my college loan documents, the car title, and the phone bill. He pointed at each one as he spoke, voice steady and clinical. "This is what we cover for you," he said. "Not anymore." My mother was crying, but every few seconds she glanced at Olivia and tightened her grip. Nobody was holding my hand. Nobody was looking at me the way you look at someone who might be telling the truth. "Just tell us the truth and we can fix this tonight," my mother said. I wanted to say, "I am telling the truth." I have been telling the truth since the moment you showed me that phone. But something in my chest had gone very quiet. The way a room goes quiet before something breaks. I understood that the truth wasn't the point. The point was whether I would say what they needed to hear. My father walked to the front door and opened it. Cold air rushed into the warm house. "Don't come back," he said, "until you're ready to be honest." I looked at my mother one last time. She didn't look back. I stood on the porch with my coat half on, keys pressing into my palm. The night was cold. Behind me, the warm light of the house leaked through the curtains. I could hear my mother's voice shifting, already softening, already moving toward comfort. Just not for me. No one followed me out. Then Olivia appeared in the doorway. She was wrapped in my mother's gray cardigan, the soft one that smelled like lavender. She looked at me for a moment, and I noticed something I hadn't quite let myself see before. Her eyes were still glossy, but her mouth wasn't trembling anymore. The performance had ended. What replaced it was quieter and harder. She stepped into the doorway and dropped her voice low. "You always thought you were better than me," she whispered. Then she shut the door. The lock clicked. That sound was small and mechanical. An ordinary sound. But it moved through me like a stone dropped into still water, rings spreading out, changing the shape of everything. Because I finally understood, this had never been about money. It had never been about the envelope or the fake texts. This was about who Olivia had decided I was allowed to be. I slept in my car that night behind a grocery store 2 miles from my parents' house. I sat in the back seat with my coat pulled over me, too embarrassed to call anyone. Too stunned to figure out the next step. My phone buzzed steadily through the night. My parents removed me from the family phone plan. Then the insurance app. Then the joint bank account where my monthly allowance had always appeared, gone. Each notification arrived like a small locked door. It wasn't just the money. It was the completeness of it. The deliberate, systematic dismantling of every piece of my stability in a single evening. At 3 a.m, I called my best friend Tessa. She answered after 2 rings. "Megan? What's wrong?" The words wouldn't organize into anything sensible. So I said the thing that was true, even though it still felt impossible. "I think my parents are done with me." Tessa was quiet for a moment. "Come here. Right now." I drove across the city with the heat on full and the radio off. I watched the streetlights pass overhead one by one. The city moved around me the way it always did, indifferent, still lit up, as if nothing significant had just ended. The weeks that followed were quiet in the worst way. The kind that comes after an explosion, when you're not sure what's been destroyed. Family friends treated me differently. At the pharmacy, a woman from my parents' church tilted her head and said she was praying for me, in the tone people use when they've already heard a story and believed it. My cousin stopped responding to texts. My aunt sent 2 lines hoping I would do the right thing. My father sent 1 email. Subject line blank. "If you return the money and apologize to your sister, your mother, and I will consider rebuilding trust." I read the word consider 4 times. They weren't waiting for truth. They were waiting for my submission. They wanted me to confess to something I hadn't done so the family story could settle back into place. So Olivia could remain protected inside the reality they had built around her. I didn't reply. I put my phone face down on Tessa's table. Then I made a decision. If no one was going to build a life for me, I would build one myself. Not to prove anything. But because the girl on that porch, with no one coming after her, deserved something real. 3 months into living on Tessa's couch, I got a call from an unknown number. Something made me answer. The voice was careful and low. My Uncle Paul, my father's younger brother, who had sat at that dinner and said nothing in my defense. "I shouldn't be calling," he said. "Then why are you?" He took a breath. "That envelope. The $10,000. A pause. It wasn't for Olivia's medical tests. I went very still. Your father told me later. He was using it to help Olivia clear her credit card debt. She'd run it up badly. He didn't want your mother to know. The medical appointment was Olivia's cover story. The room tilted. So the foundation of what I had been accused of, the fragile sister, the urgent health money, the theft from someone desperate, was constructed. Not just the lie about me. The entire situation was staged. I thanked my uncle and hung up. I sat quietly for a long time and let it settle. Not with rage. With something colder and clearer. I had been thrown out of my family to protect a lie built on top of another lie. And no one was coming to tell me that. I enrolled in a community college nursing program because it was what I could afford, and because I needed work that was real and useful, work that didn't depend on anyone's approval to matter. The first year was hard. I worked double shifts at a diner on weekends. I studied on the bus. I ate whatever was cheapest and slept as much as I could, which was never enough. Some mornings I would hear my mother's voice in my head, soft and tired, saying, "Just apologize and come home." Every time I almost gave in, I remembered the click of that lock. I kept going. Not to prove something to them. I understood early they might never acknowledge what they had done. I was doing it for the version of myself that had stood on that porch with no one coming after her. She deserved someone fighting for her, and since no one else would, it had to be me. By my second year I was near the top of my class. Not because I was the smartest in the room. Because I had stopped waiting for a safety net and started building one, thread by thread, day by day. Slowly, steadily, I became someone my family didn't recognize. 2 years after that dinner, Olivia called. I stared at her name through 2 full rings. Then I answered, some part of me still curious what story she would arrive with. Her tone was breezy. Easy. Like we had talked last week. Hey, she said. I need a small favor. I'm applying for an apartment and they want references. You're the only one in the family with stable work history. Could you write a short letter? Something hard moved through my chest. You destroyed my life, I said. She sighed. The sigh of someone who finds another person's pain mildly inconvenient. You're still doing the victim thing? A pause. Then quietly, almost casually, besides, you did take it. She hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time. Not because her words had broken me the way they once might have. But because of what they revealed. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't ashamed. After everything, she was completely certain she would never be held accountable. That no one would believe me even if I tried. That certainty was the most frightening thing I had ever seen in her. I got up off the floor. Made tea. Went to work the next morning. I kept building. I graduated top of my cohort. When my name was called, I walked across a small stage in a community center with folding chairs. Tessa screamed from the 3rd row and embarrassed us both. No one from my family came. I had not invited them. The emergency department suited me in ways I hadn't predicted. It rewarded stillness. It rewarded people who could stay clear-headed when everything around them was chaos. People who could hold pressure on a wound with steady hands while their own heart was hammering. I had been quietly training for exactly this kind of work for 5 years. I moved into my own apartment, small, clean, bright in the mornings. I bought furniture piece by piece. I set up my own phone plan, insurance, savings account with automatic deposits. Every bill I paid alone felt like a statement that needed no audience. I didn't become bitter. I know that might sound unlikely. But bitterness requires maintaining a constant inventory of what you lost, and I didn't have the energy for that. I had too much building to do. The girl on that porch deserved a full life. Not a half-life built around waiting for an apology. A real life, built from the ground up, owned completely. That was what I gave her. 5 years after the night my father pointed at the door, he emailed me. Subject line, your mother misses you. 4 sentences. My mother thought about me. The holidays felt different. He hoped I was well. He signed it with his first name, not Dad. Just his first name, like we were colleagues. Like he wasn't sure what title he still had the right to use. No apology. No acknowledgement of what had happened. No question about my life or whether I was safe. Just the information that my mother missed me, delivered like a news update I might want to consider. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and stood at the kitchen counter while my tea water boiled. I felt something unexpected, not anger, not grief exactly, but a hollow ache for the father I had wanted him to be. For the version of that night where he pushed the phone back across the table and said, "Let's hear her out." Where he chose uncertainty over certainty. That father had never existed. I knew that clearly. I didn't reply. But that night I cried in the shower like I was still 22 and new to all of this pain. The night everything changed, my hospital was running on chaos. Flu season had turned the ER into a battlefield. Every bay was full. The waiting room had spilled into the hallway. We were short 3 nurses and I was 11 hours into a 12-hour shift, running on cold coffee and habit. Then the ambulance bay doors burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in with a gurney, shouting handoff details: female patient, late 20s, unresponsive, suspected severe anaphylaxis, blood pressure dropping fast. Before the doors finished swinging, we were all moving, gloves snapping, monitors attached, orders called. I stepped forward and looked down at the patient's face. The lights caught her hair, her jaw, the familiar arch of her brow. Time slowed and then lurched forward again. My whole body recognized her before my mind could process it. Olivia. Her lips were tinged blue. Her face was swollen. Her breathing shallow and labored. Behind the gurney came my parents, my mother's hair loose and wild, my father with 10 years aged into his face in a single evening. His eyes swept the room the way a drowning person sweeps the water. They landed on my badge. Then on my face. My father said my name like a prayer he'd forgotten he still knew. For 1 second, I was 22 years old again. Standing on a cold porch with a locked door behind me. Then my training took hold and everything else went silent. Trauma 2, I said. Let's move. I was already at the gurney. Already assessing. Airway first. Breathing rate. Color. The epinephrine was in my hand within seconds. I called orders without looking back at my parents, though I knew exactly where they were. I could feel my mother's presence the way you feel a shift in air pressure before a storm. She appeared at my elbow, grabbing for my sleeve. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, Megan," I moved my arm gently but firmly. "You need to wait in the family room," I said. "The best thing I can do for her is my job. Please let me do it." I didn't look at her face. Not out of cruelty. But because Olivia's airway was closing and every second mattered. I was also the person they had thrown away. Neither of those things cancelled the other. Both were true at once. There was a patient. I had decided a long time ago what kind of person I was going to be. I went to work. Olivia stabilized after 40 minutes that felt much longer. When the monitors reported steadier numbers and her breathing had evened, I stepped into the hallway. My father was waiting just outside the door. He looked older. Thinner. Something permanently tired had settled around his eyes. He looked at me like a man trying to recognize a face from a dream. "We didn't know you worked here," he said. "You didn't know because you never asked," I said quietly. "You never asked anything about my life." His mouth opened. Then closed. My mother appeared behind him. She looked at me with swollen eyes and whispered, "Oh, sweetheart," in a voice so full of tenderness it hurt to hear, because she said it as if she still had that right. As if 5 years hadn't passed. Then my father said the sentence that turned something cold inside me. "Can you make sure she gets the best care?" Not, I'm sorry. Not, are you all right? Not, we were wrong about everything. Can you make sure she gets the best care? As if I were still a resource. A utility. Something useful they could point at a problem and expect results from. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I turned and walked back inside. When the immediate crisis passed, I reviewed Olivia's full medical chart carefully. What I found confirmed something I had suspected for years without letting myself say it clearly. Olivia had been to 4 different emergency rooms across 3 cities in 5 years. Clinical notes painted a consistent picture, a patient with a severe documented allergy, in her records for years, that she had ignored repeatedly. Multiple notes flagging non-compliance. Missed follow-up appointments. A pattern that concerned every physician who had ever documented it. Olivia wasn't unlucky. She was reckless. And she had been protected from consequences so completely, for so long, that she had stopped believing consequences applied to her at all. My parents had been absorbing the impact of her choices for years, automatically, the way you breathe, without realizing how long you've been doing it. Constant readiness to catch her before she hit the ground. She had never actually hit the ground. Not until tonight. I set the chart down and stood quietly in the corridor for a moment. I thought about the envelope. The texts. The click of that lock. 5 years of building a life from nothing while this family continued shielding Olivia from the results of her own choices. Then I went back to my patients. I found my parents in the family waiting room. My mother held a paper cup of cold coffee she wasn't drinking. My father sat very straight, hands folded, studying the floor. Both looked up when I entered, the same desperate, hopeful expression on both their faces, like I was carrying news that could fix everything. "She's stable," I said. "She's going to be okay." My mother released a breath that sounded years old. My father briefly closed his eyes. Then my mother reached for my hands. I let her hold them for a moment. Her fingers were cold. "I prayed you'd come back to us," she whispered. I pulled my hands back gently. "I didn't come back. I work here. I was already here." My father leaned forward. "Whatever happened back then," he said carefully, "family is what matters. We can move past this." I looked at him steadily. "You cut me off the same night you threw me out," I said. "You removed me from insurance, from the bank, from the phone plan. You never once called to check if I was alive. And you are asking me to move past it, with no acknowledgement. No apology." His face tightened. "You hurt your sister." There it was. Still. Even now. Even here. Some things, apparently, survived everything. Olivia was moved to a recovery room that evening. My parents went to sit with her, and I returned to my shift, moving through the department on the muscle memory of 5 years training, present and focused even with everything inside me running loud. Around midnight, passing Olivia's room, I heard my mother's voice through the open door, warm and soft, the voice she always reserved for Olivia. I was about to keep walking. Then Olivia's voice drifted out. Thick with medication, words loose and unguarded. "Did you tell her not to say anything?" My feet stopped. My mother, confused, "Tell who, sweetheart?" Olivia again, slower, "About the envelope." "About what really happened?" Silence. My father's voice, sharper, "What does that mean?" I heard Olivia's breathing change, the quick shift of someone realizing they have said too much. "Nothing," she said quickly. "I'm confused. It's the medication." I stood in the hallway and did not move. A crack. Small, but real. The kind of crack that appears in walls before something gives way. I had learned over 5 years that once a crack opens in a lie, it doesn't repair itself. It doesn't close again on its own. It only spreads. Later, at the nurse's station, an older colleague named Patrice came to stand beside me. She had worked this hospital for nearly 2 decades. She glanced toward the waiting area. "You're related to that family?" she asked. "The patient is my sister," I said. Patrice was quiet. "That young woman, she's been treated at 2 other hospitals. Different cities. Similar situations. Same documented allergy." She paused. "Each time, the parents come running. Always apologizing to her. Like it's somehow their failure." I kept my eyes on the chart. "The parents seem scared of her," Patrice added. "Not just protective. More like, controlled." After she walked away, I sat with that word. Scared. Not protective. Controlled. I turned it over and thought about every dinner, every holiday, every careful navigation around Olivia's moods. What if my parents hadn't been parenting her? What if somewhere along the way, they had started managing her? What if the fragility they kept shielding wasn't weakness at all? What if it was leverage? I thought about the envelope. My father's one blank email in 5 years. And the way Olivia had said I did what I had to do, not defensively, but flatly. Like a statement of plain fact. The hospital's social worker, Dr. Wren, stopped me in the corridor the next morning. "Quick question," she said. "Your parents listed you as your sister's emergency contact." I looked at her. "They listed me? Primary support contact." I wanted to verify before we finalized the paperwork. "I am not her emergency contact," I said. I was not asked. I did not agree to that. Dr. Wren made a note. "Then, there's also an insurance complication. Her coverage has been lapsed for several months, premiums unpaid." And there it was. Simple, practical, and completely clarifying the $10,000 from my father's safe. Money I had been accused of stealing, expelled from my home over, cut off over, called a liar over, that money had almost certainly gone toward exactly this. Clearing Olivia's debt. Covering her lapsed premiums. Absorbing yet another round of consequences she had generated and then walked away from. And when it disappeared, Olivia needed an explanation that didn't point back at her. She needed a story. A name to attach to it. I was the quietest person in the house. The one who never caused scenes. The most convenient choice. I thanked Dr. Wren and went back to work. My father, too restless to sit still, offered to get Olivia's medication list from the car. He returned with a worn folder, the kind that lives in a glove compartment for years, soft at the corners. He spread the contents across the table searching for the right paper. Old bills. Insurance forms. Appointment cards. Then a receipt slipped out and landed face up between us. I picked it up. Electronics retailer. 5 years old. Dated to the exact week my family had thrown me out. A financing agreement for a new mobile phone. Olivia's signature at the bottom. I set it down carefully and stood very still while my brain assembled the pieces. A new phone meant a new number. Or more precisely, it meant the ability to establish an account, a SIM, a number that could appear familiar in a screenshot if no one examined the metadata too closely. The fake text thread my mother had slid across the table, the confession from my number, hadn't required access to my actual phone at all. It only required someone patient enough to plan it. I placed the receipt face up on the table and said nothing. My father was still searching through papers. He hadn't noticed what I was holding. I went to Olivia's room during a quieter stretch of the morning. I didn't bring anger. I had learned that anger was loud and could be deflected. What I brought instead was calm, the measured stillness I used with patients who were frightened or defensive. The kind of quiet that makes dishonest people uncomfortable because it gives them nothing to push against. I pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. "Where did those texts come from?" I asked. She looked at the ceiling. "You're still doing this?" "I'm here in my professional capacity," I said. "There are inconsistencies in the account of events from 5 years ago that have complicated your current insurance documentation. I need the accurate version. That word, documentation, landed differently than any emotional appeal. I watched it land. Olivia's eyes came to mine. Held there. I was scared, she said quietly. Of what? Dad finding out it was me. I took the money. I panicked. A pause. I thought you'd just deny it and it would blow over. I didn't think they'd actually. She stopped. She tried to pull the words back. But they already existed. They were already real. Down the hallway, I heard a footstep stop outside the open door. My father had heard. He stood in the doorway holding the folder, his face completely white. He didn't come into the room. He stood like a man whose foundation just shifted under him, deciding whether to stay upright. What did you just say? His voice was barely a whisper. Olivia's survival instinct activated immediately. Her face shifted into its familiar arrangement, the trembling chin, the filling eyes, the reaching hands. Dad, I'm confused. The medication is making me say things, stop. He said it gently. But he said it. For possibly the first time in Olivia's life, he said stop to her and held it there. My mother appeared behind him. She looked between us, terrified, already sensing the shape of what was coming. Olivia, cornered in a way she had never truly been before, let the act drop. Just for a moment. Just long enough. I did what I had to do, she said. Flat. Cold. Honest. My mother made a sound I had never heard from her. Low and broken, like something tearing slowly at the seams. My father stood in the doorway and looked at his younger daughter. Then he said, in a voice that shook from its foundation, you watched us throw her out. You let us do it. Olivia said nothing. The next morning, the hospital required accurate documentation for Olivia's discharge and a formal insurance review. My father tried to steer the conversation toward the easiest version. My mother kept looking at the door. Dr. Wren sat across from them. We need the accurate account of events. I placed the electronics receipt on the table. I placed a printed timeline beside it, dates of Olivia's previous ER visits, the insurance lapse period, the date the money was taken from the safe. I laid out what was true and let it do its work. Then I looked at both my parents. I'm not this family's scapegoat anymore, I said. I spent 5 years building a life from nothing because you chose her story over my truth. But I am not available to absorb this family's consequences any further. My mother grabbed my hands. Please. She didn't mean for it to go so far. You didn't mean for it to go so far either, I said. And it still did. My father's shoulders dropped. He looked like a man seeing a real cost for the first time. Tell us what to do, he whispered. That's not mine to answer. You don't get back into my life just because you need something from me. Olivia was discharged the next afternoon with a treatment plan and a referral to a behavioral health specialist, something the attending physician recommended and my parents, for the first time, did not argue against. They left together. My mother's arm through my father's. Olivia walking ahead of them, quieter than I had ever seen her. Nothing left to perform for. Before they reached the exit, my father turned back. Can we fix this? He asked. He said it the way he always approached problems, like something with a beginning and a predictable end. I stood in the corridor in my scrubs, badge on my chest, morning light pale through the windows. I hope you become people who understand what they did, I said. But I'm not offering myself up as part of that journey. My mother's eyes filled. We lost you. Yes, I said. You did. Then I walked back in. Back to my patients. Back to my work. Back to the life I had built without applause or a safety net or anyone saying we believe you. When my shift ended, I stepped outside. The sky was pale and still. The air cold and clean. I didn't need them to choose me anymore. I had been choosing myself every day for 5 years. And that was enough.